Welcome to the Alyosha Society, everyone, where we are pursuing truth, beauty, and goodness through great literature. Yeah, we're going to be back to our old friend again here, the Russian doll. You know, doll within a doll within a doll, frame within a frame within a frame. This is video number 6, and of 10 total videos that we're going to be doing on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. All right, let's take a look at where we are here. So this is volume 2, chapters 3 to 6. Yeah, this is going to be story within a story within a story. Volume 2, chapters 3 to 6. Mainly, we're going to be looking at the monster or the creature. All right, if you think that's not politically correct or mean to call him the monster. I mean, he did kill a bunch of people. But anyway, all right. Let's move on. We can talk about what to call him later. Just a little bit of recap on things that we've talked about in the past that I want to make sure you're not forgetting. Remember, this novel is really 2 specific genres that we're examining: epistolary novel, but it's also a Gothic novel. Who is writing to whom? Talked about that quite a bit. Robert Walton and his sister. And then there are letters within the letters, of course. Why are they writing to each other? He's informing her of his adventures, but the outer frame mirrors, parallels, you might want to say, events, ideas, and so forth in the inner frame. What's relationship, brother, sister? So how much time is elapsing, given the timestamps on that? So there's a lot going on here. I don't really think there's any secretive communications, but that's a good thing to ask when you're reading an epistolary novel. Gothic. What's the primary theme of the novel? And then why do you think now this, we're not quite here yet. So hang tight on this one. When we get to the end, we're going to be examining the question of, okay, what is Mary Shelley trying to communicate in this novel? Is it just a ghost story? Is it just something to, scare people? Or is there a deeper message to it? I think there's at least 1 or 2 deeper messages to it. And then the question is, why would the author pick the Gothic genre to communicate that message? I believe the Gothic genre is valid. I think it's important. I think it's okay for Christians to even use it. I think it's a genre that can be used to communicate the true nature of man, and that is his sinfulness. We're going to talk about that today. Did Mary Shelley actually even believe in the sinfulness of man? Remember, she was not a Christian. She is not writing from a Christian worldview at all. And how does that worldview impact the way you interpret the Gothic theme? So, there's what Mary Shelley intended, perhaps, if we can discern that. Got to be careful with authorial intent. Remember, we've talked about that in the past. And then there's what is obvious and what can we conclude from what's going on because of common grace. Mary Shelley was still a human being made in the image of God, and there are certain things that she's going to do that she may not even realize it in terms of paralleling the gospel and communicating truth. All truth is God's truth. There's a couple of things I wanted to show you, just interesting little tidbits. When I'm reading a work of literature, some of the things that go on in the mind. And one of them was looking at the creation, Victor's bringing to life the creature. And when I read that scene, I think I even told you, probably my favorite scene in the novel, I immediately thought, now that is an interesting parallel with Scripture, isn't it? She says, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature. Of course, this is Victor talking. When I said she, I meant Mary Shelley. But I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. Ugh, it's kind of eerie. Just that little part is so eerie. It breathed hard in a convulsive motion, agitated its limbs. I worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. Okay. I thought of Genesis 2:7 when I read that. The Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. and man became a living being. Look at the parallels in there. Isn't that interesting? There's breathing, there's animation, there's a creator who's infusing life, as Victor says. There's a lot of fascinating parallels here. And we have eye in one account and limbs, we have nostrils in the other, and then the passage goes on. Victor says, but now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Victor creates his monster, and he's disgusted with it. In contrast to that, look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. God looked out upon his creation. And this is, now you could say, yeah, maybe that was before he made man, who ended up becoming sinful and ruining everything. No, this is the end of the sixth day. So God had already created man at this point, and he still says it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. God did not make mankind and then look out upon him with horror and disgust. Interesting. Just a quick reminder, because we're going to be coming upon some of these characters that we haven't really talked about. I think you already know who William is Victor's brother in the story. For some reason, I'm trying to move my video. It's literally not letting me move it. Justine, the young lady adopted into the family, going to be accused of a terrible crime. And then today we're going to be talking about the peasants that the creature encounters. There's this elderly blind man named Lacey. Then there's Felix and Agatha. And there's a woman, a separate woman, I don't think she's part of the family, named Safi. I want you to be thinking about the meanings of those names. I realize that most of you have probably not had Greek. Some of you have probably had some Latin. But I want you to be thinking about Felix and Agatha and Safi. Their names have some deeper meaning to them. Pretty sure Mary Shelley intended to communicate something interesting with that. So where have we been so far? Yeah, well, the story opens in Medias Res, just like the ancient epics, kind of in the middle of things. In fact, it's almost at the end of things. And Frankenstein comes aboard the ship, and Robert Walton tells us the whole story. Early years, he was possessed with this obsession with life and science and lightning and fire and so forth. And so he starts collecting his corpses. And as we just looked at, his first reaction to this being that he had infused life into was horror, not delight, not love, not satisfaction. He wasn't pleased. And then, of course, this creature ends up going on a rampage. William is murdered. Justine is accused and convicted and executed for the crime. So now we have multiple deaths as a result. Now here's what I want you to be looking for. I don't have the answers to these because we haven't got there yet. The creature is going to end up making a very interesting request of Victor as they talk. And then we'll be talking about how the whole thing comes to an end. Let's get into it, guys. Volume 2, Chapter 3, page 93, if you're using the version I have here. And remember, doll within a doll, frame within a frame within a frame, story within a story within a story. So now Victor is telling his story to Robert Walton, who's recounting all these events to his sister in letters. But now we have the creature who is telling Victor his story. Look at the bottom of page 92. And then it just kind of goes up the chain with the Russian dolls. But I consented to listen, and seating myself by the fire, which my odious companion had lighted, He thus began his tale. That's the bottom of page 92. It's the end of chapter 2. So again, just like the ancient epics, just like Odysseus did with the Phaeacian people, just like Aeneas did with Queen Dido and the Carthaginians, he just like those ancient epic heroes, he's going to sit now and tell his story. All right. So a couple of things I want to point out. First page here, 93. Well, let's just start from the beginning. It is with considerable, I don't know, what kind of accent do you do with the monster? Is it like a refined British accent? I don't know. It is with considerable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. He's pretty articulate, isn't he? This guy's never been to school a day in his life. He's only existed for a brief period of time. He sounds pretty intelligent. Like, it sounds like a PhD candidate here. A strange multiplicity of sensations seized me, and I saw and I felt and heard and smelt at the same time. I think that's interesting. I think what Mary Shelley's doing here throughout this whole passage is humanizing the creature. The creature is sort of learning what it means to become human. He's going to start feeling things. He's going to be using his 5 senses. He's going to start reading and get educated. He's going to learn the power of language, of how to communicate. A little further down on page 93, the light became more and more oppressive to me, and the heat, wearying me as I walked, sought a place where I could receive shade. Okay, so feeling, thinking, sensations. Once again, look at the top of page 95. I'm just going to whip through some things very quickly. If you need to pause the video to catch up with me, you can. I thought, I was pained, I reflected. Those are the beginnings of 3 different sentences in the first half of page 95. Once again, these are not really things you think of an animal doing. These are things you think of a human being with, dare I say it, with a soul. Now that is going to be a fun Monday night discussion. If you're doing the Monday night, did the monster have a soul? Oh, that's a creepy question. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about that one. All right, page 96. Now, this is where he's going to meet the DeLacy family. He's out in the woods, and he talks about how, he finds this hut, this sort of cottage out there. He said there was an old man sitting there near a fire over which he was preparing breakfast, and he ends up stealing some food from them and so forth. But this is where he first encounters these individuals. What do you start thinking things like, what is Mary Shelley doing here? What is the point of the DeLacy, Safie, Felix, Agatha little subplot? Okay, be thinking about that. Bottom of page 98. There was an old man leaning his head on his hands in a disconsolate attitude. The young girl was occupied in arranging the cottage, but presently she took something out of a drawer which employed her hands. She sat down beside the old man, who took up an instrument. He began to play and to produce sounds. So now he hears music for the first time. Very humanizing, isn't it? Sweeter than the voice of the thrush or the nightingale. It was a lovely sight, even to me, poor wretch, who had never beheld aught beautiful before. The silver hair and benevolent countenance of the aged cottager won my reverence. So he really starts to like these people, while the gentle manners of the girl enticed my love. Okay, interesting. Chapter 4. The monster, of course, is still telling his story to Victor. Chapter 4, I lay on my straw, but I could not sleep. I thought of the occurrences of the day. What chiefly struck me was the gentle manners of these people, and I longed to join them, but dared not. He knew they would think he was hideous. He was 8 feet tall. He was made out of the body parts of corpses. It's not like they're going to say, oh, hey, look, honey, looks like we got a visitor for dinner. Yeah, maybe we're dinner. Yeah, anyway. I remember too well the treatment I had suffered the night before from the barbarous villagers. So he's going to encounter beauty and all these wonderful sensations, but he's also going to encounter cruelty. He's going to encounter beauty. He's going to encounter cruelty. 102. He starts then pondering human condition, the human condition. And one thing that he ponders here is poverty. Where does poverty come from? Why are some people poor? Why do some people not have much and other people have a lot? What he's actually doing, whether Mary Shelley wants to recognize it or not, is he's starting to understand the nature of man, the sinfulness of man. Now, again, I don't think Mary Shelley would have worded it that way. She wasn't a Christian. She's not somebody who believed that the Bible had the answers to these questions. But she's asking the same questions that we all ask, and she's making the same observations that we all make. Middle of page 102. This trait of kindness moved me sensibly. I had been accustomed during the night to steal a part of their store for my own consumption. So he confesses, I had to steal some of their food. I was hungry. But when I found that in doing this, I inflicted pain upon them, I abstained and satisfied myself with berries and nuts and roots and so forth. Now, here's a question that I think we should discuss on the Monday night version. Did the monster have a soul? Either way, how is it that he has a conscience? Do you think he would have had a conscience? If we could put together some kind of creature from old dead body parts, and if we could reanimate that thing, would it have a conscience? Because he says here that when he realized that when he stole food from them, that it was hurting them, he stopped. Okay, that, my friends, is knowing right from wrong. He's somehow understanding right from wrong. How does he do that? How does he have a concept of morality? How would ethics mean anything to a being like this? I know some of you are thinking, Bruce, you're talking about this like it happened or could happen. I know, but that's the whole point. We're exploring these ideas that Mary Shelley is communicating, and we're asking, are these biblical ideas? I don't know. To me, that's the fun part of literature. All right, page 103, next page over. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, and wood. I learned the names of the cottagers. He says the girl was called Sister or Agatha. The youth, Felix, brother or son. Next paragraph. So he's learning their names. Again, things are becoming more personal, more human. I spent the winter in this manner, he says, sort of watching this family from a distance. The gentle manners and the beauty of these cottagers greatly endeared them to me. When they were unhappy, I felt depressed. When they rejoiced, I sympathized in their joys. Okay. Skip over now to 106. 106. That is going to be the end of chapter 4. Remember in the previous lesson, we talked about the deification of nature, very much a romantic ideal, you know, the romantic poets. Remember, Mary Shelley is living kind of right at the bend, you know, between, you know, sort of end of Enlightenment, beginning of Romanticism. Not that there is such a neat little divide and everybody stopped thinking one way and started thinking another, but you know what I mean. Historically, she was born in 1797, so right there. Look at the end of chapter 4. The pleasant showers and genial warmth of spring greatly alter the aspect of the earth. Men who before this change seemed to have been hid in caves dispersed themselves and were employed in the various arts of cultivation. The birds sang in the more cheerful notes and the leaves began to bud forth on the trees. Happy, happy earth, fit habitation for gods, which so short a time before was bleak, damp, and unwholesome. My spirits were elevated by the enchanting appearance of nature. The past was blotted from my memory. The present was tranquil, and the future gilded by bright rays of hope and anticipations of joy. Now, what the creature is saying there, Mary Shelley ultimately, is that nature has the ability to transform you. It has the ability to change you. You see the difference here. May seem a little bit subtle. It may seem, well, Bruce, you're making a big deal out of this. All Mary Shelley's doing is talking about the beauty of nature. We see that all throughout the Bible, and there's nothing wrong. No. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. What I am saying is that I think Mary Shelley probably goes over the line. And instead of saying, look at nature, nature tells us about the character of God, and to him be the glory as the creator of it, as opposed to I'm worshiping nature itself. Remember Romans chapter 1, where Paul talks about the descent into sinfulness is when mankind stopped worshiping the creator and began worshiping the creation instead. Remember Psalm 19, the heavens declare the handiwork of God. Not the heavens declare the handiwork of capital N nature or Mother Nature or Mother Earth or something like that. All right, there's a few more passages and we're going to wrap this one up, my friends. 110. Now the creature starts to read. Now he's kind of starting to educate himself. He starts talking about books that he read and all the things that he learned. Remember, he's already been struggling with cruelty and beauty and poverty and, and all the five senses. Look at what he says here. As he was reading, he starts learning once again. He's making comments about the nature of man. I heard of the slothful Asiatics, of the stupendous genius and mental activity of the Grecians, of the wars and wonderful virtue of the Romans, all these characteristics, of their subsequent degeneration, of the decline of that mighty empire, of chivalry, Christianity, and king. He just summarized about, 1,500 to 2,000 years of history right there, didn't he? Yeah, and he's going, I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere. Hey, we get a shout out. And wept with Safie over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. See, he's talking about how the European nations came over to what is now the United States, North America, whatever you want to call it, and mistreated the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples, whatever the politically correct term is there. And which is true, which is absolutely true. But notice how it's interesting to me that Mary Shelley is kind of starting to dabble in these social issues and questions that are way deeper than just somebody telling a ghost story. She's already been asking questions about cruelty and barbarity, and she's struggling with questions about the man's inhumanity to man. These are moral issues, aren't they? These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Man was indeed at once so powerful and so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base. Man could be glorious and wonderful, but degenerate and cruel at the same time. Yeah, it's true. The Bible explains exactly how and why that came about. He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another time, all that can be conceived of as noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have appeared, the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. And look at this last sentence of this paragraph. For a long time, I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. It's almost like, if you know, when people ask questions like, what if an alien came from another universe or another, galaxy and visited our little planet here? What would the observations that person would make? Someone who's a complete third party outsider. The monster's almost kind of putting himself in that kind of position, isn't he? But notice too, I think a big part of Mary Shelley's message is that man's cruelty, man's sinfulness, I'm going to use the theological biblical term. She might not have used that term, I'm not sure, is not because he is a sinful being. And as Jesus says in the book of Matthew, chapter 13, that, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, that if the tree is bad, then the fruit's going to be bad. It's very clear, biblically speaking, that we are cruel and sinful, and we commit cruel and sinful acts because we are cruel and sinful. It's in the nature of our being. It comes from within. I think what Mary Shelley is pointing out, what the monster's trying to communicate, is that, we're made kind of, sort of, basically good, and it's our environment that makes us bad and evil and cruel. And that if the monster would have just been left out in the state of nature, he would have been basically good. Yeah, that is not a true statement about the nature of man, is it? Okay, let's wrap this up. Yeah, and in chapter 6 is going to get into the nature, the history of these beloved cottagers. And once again, we have history within a history within a history within a history. The Russian dolls are just all over the place here. I hope you're able to keep up with it. But I want you to keep asking the questions that we've been exploring in this lesson. What are the deeper philosophical issues that Mary Shelley is exploring here? These are deep. Yeah, this is way more than just a ghost story. All right, be sure you get your reading done. We went over that on the outline of videos before you dive into video number 7. See you then, friends.